time for us to get into your theories. A couple of weeks ago, I asked you guys to send in your best Severance theories, and let me tell you, some of these completely shattered everything I thought I knew about the show. So, this video is all about diving into your wildest, most mind-blowing ideas. So let me stop yapping and let's get into it. In Season 2, Episode 7, there's a moment that caught Loose Direction 6807's attention. Mr. Drummond tells the doctor,
"When he's done, you're gonna have to say goodbye to her."
Later, Gemma herself asks what happens when she's been through all the rooms, and the doctor replies,
"You will see the world again, and the world will see you."
Sounds poetic, right? But what if it's literal? How could Gemma be gone, but also still be able to see the world and have the world see her? The theory suggests that Lumon is actually working on something much bigger than just memory alteration. They're testing the ability to upload human consciousness into a new body. So what does that mean for Gemma? Well, according to this theory, Lumon is using Gemma in two ways. Number one, to develop or refine technology that allows people to sever from a broad range of unpleasant memories. This is why she's going through all those horrifying rooms where each one seems to test a different fear or psychological trigger. They're experimenting with how the human mind reacts to the process. Number two, to test the possibility of uploading a person's consciousness into a new body, or possibly a robotic form, which will then create immortality. And if that's the case, then what's happening to Gemma right now is just the first step. Now let's say Lumon has figured out a way to preserve and transfer consciousness through the chips. This theory suggests that they might actually be simulating death within Cold Harbor. Picture this. They simulate drowning to create a scenario where Gemma dies, but because of the Severance tech, she doesn't remember the event. Then they actually kill her for real and store her consciousness inside the chip before she loses it completely. Next, Lumon uploads her consciousness into a new body. And this body could be a child who was raised for this purpose, or something more mechanical, like a robotic form. And then finally, they introduce Gemma 2.0 to the world. They could say that she was one of their research subjects, that she technically died, but thanks to Lumon's technology, she's been brought back to life. If this were true, Gemma wouldn't even remember dying. She'd just wake up in her new body and keep living as if nothing happened. That's where the whole
"You will see the world again, and the world will see you"
line starts to make a lot of sense. Now that we have the theory, what kind of evidence does Loose Direction 6807 provide? Let's start with Lumon's obsession with self-realization and refining the self. Lumon is deeply invested in the idea of self-improvement. They refine their workers through the severance process, stripping away unwanted thoughts and emotions. But what if the next step is eliminating death altogether? If they can refine someone enough, removing all their flaws, why not allow that perfected consciousness to continue existing beyond the limitations of a single human life? This would explain their interest in the four tempers. What if Lumon is trying to create the perfect version of a human mind, one that can be uploaded and recycled endlessly? Then we have the beehive motifs. There has been a handful of references to bees and beehives throughout the series. Now, bees are known for having a collective intelligence. What if Lumon is experimenting with a similar concept, merging multiple minds into one consciousness? Now imagine that when one body dies, its consciousness gets transferred into another, and when that body dies, it happens again, over and over, collecting more and more minds into a single existence. That would be the ultimate form of immortality. Then we have Gemma and the testing floor. If you've noticed, in episode 7 of season 2, Gemma's scenes on the testing floor look like they're from different time periods. What if Lumon is testing how well a consciousness can adapt to different time frames? Maybe they're using old memories or even implanting artificial memories to see how Gemma's mind reacts. Then we have the Petey moment. When Cobel gets Petey's severance chip, Milchick doesn't say, "Is that his chip?" He says,
"That's Petey."
That's Petey.
Now, if lumen is simply altering memories, this wouldn't make sense. But if they were actually capturing and storing entire consciousnesses within the chips, suddenly it does. And then we have obsession with death. Milchick tells the innies,
I think this is a good time to remind ourselves that things like deaths happen outside of here. Not here. A life at Lumen is protected from such things.
we know that's not true. People can die in lumen.
I thought bereavement events were for innies who die on the floor.
Yes.
What if this is Lumen's long-term goal? To create a world where death doesn't exist, where people can be transferred, recycled, and live forever within the system. Now this is where things get even weirder and scarier. We know Lumen is raising children within the cult, which was confirmed by Ragabi.
She's Lumen through and through. She was raised by them. She's a soldier.
What if they're grooming these children to become the next vessels for consciousness uploads? They could be raised believing it's an honor to carry on someone else's existence. Now also, the whole Mind Collective has been protesting about children's brain health.
You folks have a moment for children's brain health?
We do.
Great. We're trying to get a measure on the ballot to keep megacorporations like Lumen from continuing to force legalized severance on our state.
That's what they're lobbying for. And James Egan is trying
Okay,
to sever
well, what
kids-
about this self?
Now, if Lumen can alter perception, then those baby goats we saw, what if they're not goats at all? What if those are actual children? And Lumen has manipulated reality so that they look and sound like goats. And it fits right into the show's theme of perception versus reality. Loose Direction mentions another way they might be uploading consciousness, and it's robots. Now, there have been references to animatronics throughout the series. Then, Loose Direction 6807 points out that the Ortbo doubles that we saw seemed very alive, but also extremely off. They barely moved, their feet were almost stuck in the snow. What if Lumen's ultimate goal is to perfect the severance process, remove all negative emotions, and place the resulting consciousness into a robotic body? That way, they'd have the perfect employee, one that doesn't need food, sleep, or money, just pure and undying loyalty to the company. Now, if this is true, and if Gemma is the test subject for this, then Mark better hurry the hell up before she becomes something he can never get back. This theory suggests that Keir Egan was a Confederate soldier who experienced the harshness of labor and sought to liberate people from it, not by freeing them, but by creating the perfect system of obedience. Essentially, instead of eliminating forced labor, he reframed it as a noble duty, something his children would embrace rather than resist. Let's start with the timeline here. The Civil War ended in 1865, and 1 year later, in 1866, Lumen was supposedly founded. Now, we've also seen references to this era in Severance.
Jesus.
No, Kia.
Particularly in the Perpetuity Wing, where Keir's legacy is presented like a religious doctrine. His ideology is about removing the four tempers, taming human nature, stripping away defiance, and cultivating a worker who will never question their place. And that brings us to the language Lumen uses. Think about how the company describes events like the Macro Data Uprising. Now, IdsApples points out that the word uprising has very specific connotations, especially in American history. It's commonly associated with slave rebellions, people rising up against oppression. The fact that Lumen uses the same terminology suggests something deeper to historical systems of forced labor. Now, this is what IdsApples suggests. What if the innies aren't just workers, but rather the perfected version of enslaved people? If Keir's goal was to create an obedient workforce that could never rebel, then Severance isn't just about controlling employees. It's about ensuring permanent subjugation. Based on this theory, the Severance chip is essentially an advanced method of enslavement. By removing the four tempers, Lumen strips away the very emotions that lead to revolts. Innies are conditioned to see their role as an honor, just as Keir preaches in Lumen doctrine, and most importantly, they don't remember their suffering, meaning they cannot resist. This is why Lumen frames Severance as a privilege. It's the ultimate trick. Convince people that their servitude is something sacred, something meant for them, and they won't just comply. They will believe they should comply. And this one, it's a big one. Patrick even admits that this theory ended up being more like 4 theories in one, but it all fits together in a way that makes way too much sense. Patrick's theory is that Lumen isn't just a corporation. It's a hospital. Our refiners aren't just employees, they're patients, possibly dying from old age, a life-threatening accident, or even a suicide attempt. While unconscious or even in a coma, they reflect on how much of their life was wasted working meaningless office jobs. And once you start looking at the evidence, the medical imagery is everywhere. Injury and death motifs, the brass knuckle coffee mugs, the guillotine curtain that snaps Mark's head back in the season 2 intro. It all suggests severe injury or trauma. Color coding, Audi red, any blue, sirens. The way hospitals and emergency situations are coded. Surgical and medical references. Lumen is tied to biotech. We keep seeing babies, birth, miscarriages, and surgery. Now, ether, which was an anesthetic, also comes up. Hospital staff imagery. O&D and mammalians wear scrubs. Even though we technically now know the purpose of the dental tools, that scene in season 2, episode 5 still feels way too clinical. The white shirts, blue coats, gloves, tools on a wheeled cart, it all looks like a surgical prep room straight out from a hospital. Now, DNR? Or DNR. There's a brief glimpse at a sign for disposal and reclamation, D&R. Could that be a subtle nod to DNR, do not resuscitate? Blood everywhere. Bleeding, blood drives, finger pricks. The constant references feel too intentional. Petey's funeral imagery. The doors at Petey's funeral could just be crosses, but Patrick points out that they look more like medical plus symbols. It all adds up. Lumen is biotech, and if that's the case, then what exactly are they doing to these people? Out of all the references to death, the ones that stand out the most to Patrick are the ones that could suggest suicide. For instance, Dylan's story.
One time, he was pissed at me for watering down the toner, so he put toner in my water cup, but I did accidentally take a sip of it later because I forgot he said that.
The break room poster, Cobel's hairdryer, Dylan in the car. Another moment that Patrick believes ties into the larger suicide imagery. So what if that's why these people are here? What if the severance procedure isn't just some work-life balance experiment, but a treatment for suicidal patients, a way to disconnect them from their own pain, or even worse, a way for Lumen to take control of their minds when they're at their most vulnerable. But Patrick provides another possibility. What if our refiners are coma patients? Patrick points out that the melting icicles we keep seeing could symbolize an IV drip, slowly feeding fluids into a patient. Then the references to salt might not be random. Saline IVs are a lifeline for coma patients. Now, what about the way Ragabi measures Mark's brainwaves, which would make perfect sense if these people were being kept alive in a medical state? Then we get mentions of soap.
You want Grainer to use the bad soap. There's bad soap.
And sores on Rebecca's head.
I've been asked to share my book with you.
So I've heard. Rebecca.
Rebecca, I have small eyes, so I have to read pretty close.
Okay, well, I'm sure that'll be fine, if you'll excuse me.
And I have some sores on the back of my head from my bird. You might see them.
Okay.
All things that align with caring for bedridden patients. Finally, Patrick notes that the MDR desk setup could resemble a hospital ceiling fan or a medical plus symbol. If this theory holds up, then everything we see inside Lumen isn't real. It's just a fragmented reflection of a comatose mind processing reality in the only way it can. So now I have to ask you guys after this, what do you think? Is Lumen a hospital? Are the refiners refiners coma patients? Are we witnessing a scientific experiment on a massive scale? Is Lumen playing God? Let me know, because I need to hear where you guys stand on this one. Mad Gino throws out a possibility that completely shifts how we see Gemma and Mark's relationship. What if Gemma isn't an outie at all? What if she's an innie who was orchestrated to meet Mark? The key moment that sparked this theory happens in Shikai Bardo, when Mark asks,
I'm sorry, who are you?
Gemma.
Now, if she was truly just Gemma, wouldn't she immediately say her name? The hesitation feels too deliberate, like she's sorting through identities in real time. Now, what if Gemma's outie isn't actually named Gemma at all? Remember this scene with Helena?
Hannah.
Gemma.
Well, Mad Gino is suggesting that Hannah is actually Gemma's real outie. If that's true, then Gemma isn't just another severed employee. She's someone entirely different when she's outside Lumen. And this is where Cold Harbor comes in. According to Mad Gino, once Cold Harbor is completed, Gemma won't be able to go back to Mark because she will reintegrate completely back into her main persona, which would be Hannah, not Gemma. Now, this completely changes the meaning of Mark's entire arc. If Gemma was never really his wife in the way he remembers her, then what is their connection? Did Lumen manufacture their reunion to manipulate him into staying? So what do you guys think? Is Gemma actually an innie? Is Hannah her real outie? And if so, what is Lumen really trying to do with her? This next one is from Steven, and it's a question we've all been asking. What if Harmony Cobell is Helena Egan's mother? The idea is that when Harmony won the fellowship and created the Severance chip, she became the first test subject, either voluntarily or because Jaime Egan insisted. While she was severed, Jaime impregnated her innie and kept her severed throughout the entire pregnancy and delivery. The kicker, her outie never knew any of this. That means Helena was born without her mother ever realizing she had a child. Instead, Jaime raised Helena alone, which explains why her mother is never mentioned and why Helena has always seemed trapped in Lumen's world. And you might ask, well, what could be the evidence here? Well, first of all, this scene.
She's one of Jaime's. No one's to know.
And then the yearbook photo that shows Jaime and young Harmony Cobell as being particularly close. If this is true, then Cobell has been fighting to get back into Lumen all this time, without realizing her own daughter is at the center of it all. Now the next theory is from Sir Athena called Scared to Death. And the idea is that Cold Harbor is a place designed to literally scare someone to death. More specifically, it's constructed using Mark's knowledge of Gemma and the questionnaires she filled out about her fears. That moment when the doctor asks her this,
if you were caught in a mudslide, would you be more afraid of suffocating or drowning?
Drowning.
that wasn't random, it was just part of a larger process. Almost like Lumen is gauging just how specific and personal they can make these fear-based experiences. So how does it work? Well, according to this theory, the goal is to drive the outie consciousness out of the body, essentially frightening it so badly that it gives up, allowing Lumen to fully activate the innie. If this is true, then the different rooms on the testing floor are part of this process, each an experiment designed to numb the innie's ability to feel fear, pain, or even torture. That way, when they put someone through Cold Harbor, the outie is the one who experiences the fear, while the innie remains completely unaffected, and in the end, only the innie is left standing. And that is it for today's video. Let me know your thoughts down below. Did any of these theories completely blow your mind? Do you disagree with them? Do you agree? Do you have anything else of your own to add? I would love to hear it all. But also, please remember to be respectful in the comments down below. Now, moving on from that, if you enjoyed this type of video, should we do another theory deep dive after the season finale? let me know. Now, a huge thank you to everyone who sent in their theories. This wouldn't have been possible without you guys. And of course, thank you to everyone who took the time of day to watch or listen to this video. If you enjoy this type of content, please be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you this Saturday for the season